I am a regular guy, a coffee and cheeseburger type fellow. As remarkable as my life has been, I figured that what happens to me must be happening to others as well. I was 48 years old when I got arrested here for the first time. So I went looking for the arrest numbers for domestic violence, this new group that I had unwillingly joined. I could not find anything. So I wrote the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington. They wrote back that they did not keep track of domestic violence arrests. The FBI keeps track of all other crimes. How come not domestic violence? I thought some low-level clerk was blowing me off. At the time, I had mailing addresses in both New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So I wrote to all 6 congressional offices, 2 senators from each state, and the 2 congressmen. They like doing favors for constituents, hoping you will favorably remember their name in the voting booth. All 6 offices reported back the same thing. They do not know how many arrests for domestic violence have been made. I immediately knew something was wrong, and I knew this was not going to be good.
Cadets now learn all fundamentals of fighting from veterans of many battles.
Improvise, adapt, and overcome. The Army teaches that to every soldier it trains. They say no battle plan survives the first 5 minutes of combat, so your people on the ground had better be able to think for themselves. Taking casualties in war is just an occupational hazard. Taking casualties and not accepting your mission is a disaster. After 21 years of Army service, I am pretty good at improvising. The first thing I found was a study not of domestic violence arrests, but of domestic violence injuries for 18 unnamed states and the District of Columbia in the year 2000. In the study, 51% of the injuries were no injuries. So I knew I had a study of police reports. Who else but a police officer would record no injuries? I populated that out to the 50 states and came up with an 874,000 arrest number for the year 2000. I had originally populated the number back to 1994, when the Violence Against Women Act was enacted into law. I would later find out these arrests started with the U.S. Attorney General's Task Force of Domestic Violence 10 years earlier in 1984. As individual states' data became available for various years and states, I would incorporate it into my formal study. The number I have now in 2011 is 36 million adults have been arrested for domestic violence. I have a gut feeling this number could be as high as 55 million, but I only have data to 36 million. So 36 million it stays. And there is a really cool trick you can do once you have this number. You can find out how many American men, women, and children end up homeless because of these arrests. Most of the domestic violence statistics I have seen break down with 75% male and 25% female being arrested. So I'm going to use the male pronoun for the one arrested, spouse, and the female pronoun for the victim spouse. That should make the domestic violence feminists ecstatic. Man bad, woman good. But that is okay, because that is probably the last nice thing I am going to do for them today. When the man is arrested for domestic violence, one of 2 things can happen. If they are only dating and have separate apartments, then he can head home. But if they are living together, then this fellow has a real problem. Bail conditions and then a possible protective or restraining order prevent him from being with her. So he needs to find a new place to live, at least until the charges are resolved. The king of his castle is no longer allowed into his castle. A feminist named Pence, who wrote that, was absolutely giddy at that outcome. So he can get his own place if he has enough money. Or he can move in with his mother, his sister, or another relative. He might have a girlfriend who would let him stay with her. And if none of this is possible, well, and I guess he is sleeping in his car down by the river.